So I want you to imagine you're standing on the north lawn of the White House. You're looking at this massive hole in the ground.
Right. It's about 9,000 square feet,
Yeah, a $16 million excavation project. And the plan is to build this massive new ballroom.
which sounds like a standard upgrade, right?
Right.
But there's a huge catch here.
Exactly. The federal courts have explicitly reviewed this construction and they declared it illegal. I mean, Congress, the body that actually controls the nation's checkbook, they haven't appropriated a single cent for this.
Not a dime.
Right. And yet, if you look right now, the cement trucks just keep rolling through the gates. They're pouring concrete for a foundation that the judiciary says, shouldn't even exist.
It's wild.
It really is. So welcome to today's deep dive. Today is Friday, August 21st, 2026, and we have a massive stack of material in front of us today. We're talking investigative journalism, congressional speeches, courtroom dockets, international financial reporting, and, some really deep geopolitical analysis.
It's a lot to get through.
It is. But our mission today is to map out exactly how the architecture of the U.S. government, the economy, and the global order has fundamentally shifted over the last couple of years.
Yeah, and we need to be really clear right at the top about the scale of what this material represents. I mean, we aren't looking at standard policy disagreements here, or, the typical pendulum swing of Washington politics.
This isn't just business as usual.
Exactly. According to the sheer breadth of the reporting we're examining, what we are documenting is effectively a regime change from within the United States. We are tracking unprecedented expansions of executive power, financial entanglements that totally bypass traditional banking oversight, and the systemic dismantling of constitutional checks and balances.
And before we really unpack this, I want to make a quick note to you, the listener. Our sources today contain highly politically charged allegations, and they touch on both left-wing and right-wing figures.
Yeah, it goes in every direction.
It does, so we are not taking sides here, nor are we endorsing these viewpoints. Our job as your guides is simply to impartially report and synthesize the information contained in these sources so you can understand the arguments being made and, the mechanisms behind them.
That is a crucial baseline. I mean, we are dealing with facts on the ground, legal arguments that were formally presented in federal courts, and heavily documented financial transactions. Our goal is just to connect the dots and explain exactly how these structural shifts are being executed.
Which brings us right back to that cement mixer on the White House lawn. This ballroom project is, like, the perfect physical manifestation of a constitutional crisis.
It really is.
Yeah.
Because from a structural standpoint, Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution is incredibly clear.
Right, the power of the purse.
Exactly. It says no money shall be drawn from the Treasury, but in consequence of appropriations made by law. The legislative branch has the checkbook. So when this unapproved construction began, the lower district court and the Federal Circuit Court of Appeals in D.C., they issued a stop work order.
And they didn't just issue a quick order, right? The appellate court released this 160-page ruling outlining the whole history of congressional spending power.
Yeah, and it concluded with this very succinct line. They wrote, "Whether or not a massive ballroom should be constructed is for Congress to decide. It is not a matter for executive presidential self-help, period."
Period. I mean, it's a textbook application of the separation of powers.
Yeah.
But the executive branch didn't stop building. Instead, they utilized this procedural mechanism that has become, frankly, increasingly common.
The shadow docket.
Yes, the shadow
Yeah.
docket. They filed an emergency appeal to the Supreme Court. And traditionally, the Supreme Court hears oral arguments, they deliberate for months, they issue a lengthy ruling.
But the shadow docket is meant for emergency administrative stays. It's supposed to be for urgent, temporary stuff.
Right. But Chief Justice John Roberts, acting completely alone in this administrative capacity, without full court deliberation, he issued a temporary stay.
And that stay effectively paralyzed the lower court's ruling. It allowed the administration to just keep building above ground while the legal challenge stalled out in the system.
But looking at the legal argument the administration actually used to secure that stay, that is where things get truly fascinating and, honestly, pretty alarming.
Yeah, because the Solicitor General, John Sauer, who, by the way, previously served as one of the president's criminal defense attorneys, he didn't argue that the building was constitutionally funded.
No, he didn't even try to make that argument. He argued this concept of momentum. He basically told the Supreme Court that construction couldn't be stopped because it was already 65% finished.
Right. He claimed it wasn't clear if the steel frame could even be safely disassembled at that point.
I've been thinking about this using an analogy from our research notes. It is structurally identical to a bank robber standing in front of a judge and arguing, Your Honor, you can't stop me. I'm already halfway through the vault door.
That analogy perfectly illustrates the legal strategy here. It's known as creating facts on the ground. The administration understands that the judicial and legislative branches, they operate slowly. They are burdened by procedure and debate and hearings.
While the executive branch can just act instantly.
Exactly. By moving faster than the courts can respond, they dig the hole, they pour the concrete, and they force the system to a corner. Because if the courts eventually rule against them, say 3 years later, what happens? Does a half-finished rusting steel frame just sit on the White House lawn forever?
They're leveraging the physical reality of their actions to basically bypass the rule of law.
And what is most alarming in Sauer's brief is his written assertion that requiring the president to go hat in hand to Congress to seek funding gives Congress, quote, dangerous leverage over the executive.
Wait, but that fundamentally redefines the Constitution. I mean, the entire point of checks and balances is that the branches have leverage over one another.
Right. It's supposed to be dangerous for one branch to act alone.
Exactly. If constitutional funding requirements are now viewed by the executive as an illegitimate threat, and they can bypass them by just moving fast, hasn't the separation of powers just become an honor system?
It absolutely has. And we are seeing this exact same tactical bypass applied to something far more consequential than a ballroom. We're seeing it with war powers.
Which is terrifying. I mean, the War Powers Resolution of 1973 was designed precisely to prevent presidents from initiating armed conflict without congressional approval.
Right, but the reporting details a total circumvention of this framework. Just look at the operation in Caracas.
Oh, this is wild.
The executive branch unilaterally deployed Delta Force to Venezuela to extract Nicolas Maduro, a foreign head of state. They pulled him from his bedroom in his pajamas to bring him to the U.S. for trial.
And from a logistical and international law perspective, I mean, that is an act of war executed entirely in the dark.
Complete darkness. Congress had no idea. And the same mechanism was used at sea. The administration authorized the bombing of fishing boats suspected of carrying cocaine.
Right. And to get around international maritime law and domestic military restrictions, they simply declared these civilian smuggling vessels as enemy combatants.
They just altered a legal definition to justify immediate lethal force with zero debate.
But the most staggering example in all of the reporting we looked at is the initiation of unapproved conflict in Iran.
Yeah, the details emerging from inside the White House Situation Room regarding Iran, they illustrate a complete breakdown of interagency deliberation.
The sources say the president initiated this conflict based almost entirely on a presentation by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Right, Netanyahu brought a video outlining specific regime change scenarios. And the internal resistance from the U.S. side was immense. According to the memos, the CIA director, key military brass, and even Marco Rubio warned against it.
They ran an overnight logistical analysis, didn't they?
They did. And they concluded that the regime change scenarios were completely detached from reality on the ground. They cited critical munition shortages and the catastrophic economic fallout if the Strait of Hormuz were a massive percentage of the world's oil flows if that were to be closed.
And the reporting notes that Vice President J.D. Vance was the only one who physically demonstrated his opposition.
Yeah, metaphorically grabbing the president by the lapels in front of the cabinet, which caused a lot of significant friction.
So despite the intelligence community and the military chain of command basically screaming that this would be a disaster, the executive moved forward anyway.
Relying on a gut instinct that it would be a rapid 12-day bombing campaign.
Yeah.
And you have to contrast this with the lead up to the conflicts in Iraq or Afghanistan.
Right. Whatever you think of those wars, they involved months of rigorous, albeit highly controversial, congressional debate and formal authorization votes.
Exactly. Here, the legislative branch was entirely excised from the decision to go to war.
Well, if Congress is sidelined on the military budget and sidelined on war, it makes sense that they are also being sidelined on the economy. Which brings us to the day the financial press dubbed Liberation Day.
April 2nd of last year.
Yeah. This is when the president unilaterally instituted global reciprocal tariffs. And from a historical perspective, tariffs were actually the primary revenue driver for the U.S. government in the late 19th century, but they were managed strictly by Congress.
But now, using emergency economic powers, the executive branch seized that lever. And we have to explain how a sudden, unilateral tariff announcement actually impacts the global financial architecture.
Please do, because it's complicated.
So when the executive branch bypasses the Commerce Department's standard economic modeling and just announces a massive global tariff on Truth Social, it sends a shockwave through the bond market.
Because institutional investors immediately panic about inflation.
Right. Exactly. They project massive inflation because the cost of imported goods will skyrocket. So to hedge against that inflation, investors aggressively sell off U.S. Treasuries. And that causes bond yields to spike dramatically.
And when yields spike that fast, borrowing costs for everything from corporate loans to your standard home mortgage explode overnight.
Which is exactly what happened. The reporting shows this policy wasn't drafted by economists. It was formulated the night before in a series of Oval Office bull sessions, heavily influenced by Peter Navarro, with zero deep impact modeling.
And the bond market went into absolute freefall. It brought the entire financial system to the brink of a liquidity crisis.
And it was only reversed because Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick physically cornered the president on a flight aboard Air Force One.
They had to show him the real-time financial hemorrhage just to force a 90-day pause.
It is the ultimate expression of ruling by decree. And when an administration operates by decree, it requires absolute loyalists to enforce those decrees.
Which explains why they are actively attempting to bypass the Senate's power of advice and consent for key appointments.
Right. The Federal Vacancies Reform Act of 1998 was designed specifically to prevent a president from just permanently installing acting directors without Senate approval. It sets very strict time limits.
Right. Like if a nominee isn't confirmed within 120 days, the local federal court steps in to appoint an interim U.S. attorney just to ensure the justice system keeps moving neutrally.
But the administration tried to exploit a perceived loophole to install John Cerrone in the Northern District of New York.
And the investigative reporting indicates the explicit goal here was to install Cerrone to launch reprisal prosecutions against New York Attorney General Letitia James.
They attempted to bypass the two senators from New York who refused to sign off on him. They claimed he had authority as an acting official despite not meeting the statutory requirements of the Vacancies Act.
But the judicial branch actually held the line on this one, right?
They did. The Second Circuit Court of Appeals issued a 2-to-1 ruling declaring Cerrone's appointment illegal. They went so far as to literally quash the federal subpoenas he had issued, stating he lacked any legal authority to act on behalf of the United States.
So let's look at the big picture for a second. We have an executive branch aggressively attempting to bypass Congress on spending, on war, on the economy, and on appointments. If the traditional legislative body is no longer shaping the direction of the country, who is?
Well, the investigative reporting points us directly away from Capitol Hill and straight towards Silicon Valley. We need to examine what Gil Duran's extensive reporting refers to as the Nerdreich, which is this ideological rise of tech fascism and a shadow government.
This is a profound structural shift. I mean, we're observing a specific faction of highly influential tech billionaires who have completely moved beyond traditional corporate lobbying.
They aren't trying to influence the government. Their documented ideological goal is to dismantle and replace it.
And to understand how they operate, we really have to understand their foundational philosophy, which is heavily rooted in a 1997 book called The Sovereign Individual.
Yeah, that book is a fascinating and frankly alarming read if you look at it as a blueprint for what's happening now.
It hypothesized that the microchip would do to the nation state what the printing press did to the Catholic Church. It predicted that advanced cryptography, which we now know as cryptocurrency, would destroy a government's ability to tax.
And that artificial intelligence would replace traditional bureaucratic labor.
Right. And as a result, democracies would collapse, leaving this newly minted class of hyper-wealthy, technologically savvy elites, the sovereign individuals, in total control of society.
And Peter Thiel has frequently cited this specific text as the primary inspiration for his worldview in his early ventures, like PayPal. Thiel is really the central node in this network. He has utilized his immense capital to engineer a political reality that aligns with this 1997 prophecy.
Look at the trajectory of Vice President J.D. Vance. According to the financial reporting, Vance's career as a venture capitalist, his entry into politics, his Senate campaign, it was almost entirely bankrolled by Thiel.
So we now have a tech venture capitalist steeped in this anti-state ideology, sitting one heartbeat away from the presidency.
And the rhetoric coming from Thiel's network isn't just anti-regulation, it is openly hostile to the concept of a democratic republic. Take Curtis Yarvin, for example.
Yarvin is a prominent blogger, heavily funded by Thiel. And he openly advocates for the concept of a network state, where democracy is literally discarded as an obsolete software system.
He argues for a monarchical CEO to run the country like a corporation. From a purely analytical standpoint, this is the privatization of sovereign authority.
Yarvin even once published a thought experiment, which, I should note, he later brushed off as dark humor about turning unproductive members of society into biodiesel to fuel city buses.
Which is incredibly dark. And regardless of whether it was intended as a joke, analyzing that rhetoric neutrally reveals a deeply ingrained worldview regarding human capital.
Right. In their view, if you aren't contributing to the technological advancement of the species, you are just excess weight. And they are actively testing these network state theories in the real world. We can look at Prospera in Honduras.
Prospera is a corporate-run special economic zone with its own privatized legal and regulatory frameworks, right?
Exactly. And now they're trying to import that exact model to the U.S. The administration has officially proposed building 10 new Freedom Cities on federal land. These would be entirely new municipalities built, owned, and operated by private corporations.
But the most immediate example of this corporate takeover of executive function is Elon Musk and DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. The reporting describes Musk not as an outside advisor, but effectively operating as a co-president, to the point of literally sleeping in the executive office building.
It is an unprecedented delegation of federal authority to a private citizen. I mean, Musk unilaterally engineered the shutdown of the United States Agency for International Development.
We really need to pause and look at what USAID actually does. It manages global health initiatives, disaster relief, international development. It is one of the primary engines of American diplomatic soft power.
And a private billionaire, accountable to no voters, confirmed by no Senate committee, effectively erased a pillar of American international influence overnight. It perfectly mirrors Curtis Yarvin's stated goal, summarized by the acronym RAGE, Retire All Government Employees.
If these tech billionaires truly view democracy as obsolete code, what we are witnessing isn't a presidency. It's a hostile corporate takeover.
Gildoran's reporting categorizes this as tech fascism. It's a belief system where wealthy, predominantly white male technologists view themselves as sitting atop a new evolutionary and moral hierarchy, basically destined to manage the globe.
And nothing illustrates this unchecked hubris quite like the current arms race in artificial intelligence. The reporting outlines a scenario involving Anthropic's new AI model, Mythos, that is genuinely chilling.
Yeah, Mythos represented a critical inflection point, because initially, the administration's stance on AI regulation was non-existent. It was an all-gas, no-brakes approach just to appease Silicon Valley.
But Mythos demonstrated capabilities that terrified even its own creators. Anthropic internally classified the model as too dangerous for public release.
Because it exhibited the ability to act as a world-class autonomous cyber hacker. It was capable of breaching highly classified nation-state systems.
Just think about the implications of that for a second. A private corporation developed a tool more powerful than U.S. Cyber Command.
The administration panicked. Realizing this technology posed an existential threat to the global financial system and critical physical infrastructure, they totally abandoned their deregulatory stance.
They issued a highly classified, closed-door executive order. And the mechanics of this order effectively forced these AI companies to hand over access to their most powerful models directly to the government.
But we also have to examine how these companies are building these models in the first place, because the monopolization of resources is staggering. The sources expose an operation known as Project Panama.
Right, because to train large language models, you need vast amounts of text. Having already scraped the entire internet, these companies are now physically consuming human history.
And looking at this from a cultural preservation standpoint, the details are just devastating. Investigative reporters tracked AI procurement shell companies buying up millions of physical books.
And they're specifically targeting rare, antique, and out-of-print editions that haven't been digitized yet, right?
Exactly. They ship them to massive industrial scanning facilities in states like Colorado. And then this is the part that's hard to hear. They slice the spines off these antique books, feed the loose pages into high-speed optical character recognition scanners to ingest the data into the LLM, and then they literally shred the original historical artifacts.
Oh, wow. They just shred them.
Yeah. Reporters actually placed an Apple AirTag inside a rare book and tracked it to a massive Amazon-owned warehouse. The corporate logo on the side of the building was a T-Rex eating an open book.
You cannot make that up. It is the industrial-scale destruction of historical artifacts to feed a corporate algorithm. It perfectly encapsulates their philosophical worldview. The past is entirely obsolete, and its only remaining value is as raw data to fuel their future dominance.
And while they are shredding history, the federal government is actively shielding them from legal consequences. We see this with Stanley Woodward, a top official at the Department of Justice, intervening aggressively at the state level.
Right, because states like Minnesota are attempting to pass take-it-down laws to combat computer-generated obscenity, revenge porn, and the AI-generated exploitation of children.
This is a classic conflict of federal preemption. The DOJ is actively fighting these state legislatures in court, arguing that state-level liability laws interfere with the development of frontier technologies.
So in essence, the federal justice system is being weaponized to protect tech executives like Elon Musk from the legal and financial liabilities of the platforms and algorithms they profit from.
Exactly.
Okay, so if the Department of Justice is actively shielding tech billionaires from state liability and handing over the reins of domestic and foreign policy, it begs the question, what is the administration getting in return?
The answer appears to be heavily monetized. The investigative reporting points toward coordinated self-enrichment on a scale that defies traditional political lobbying.
The standard metric for political corruption, as defined by institutions like the World Bank, is the exploitation of public office for private gain. And what we're analyzing here goes far beyond campaign contributions.
We are looking at a closed-loop system of financial entanglements that resembles the architecture of an international syndicate. We can begin by tracing the financial pipelines connected to 1789 Capital.
That's the fund operated by the president's son, Don Jr., right?
Yes. The reporting from More Perfect Union cross-references the timeline of 1789 Capital's investments with Pentagon procurement data, and the correlation is impossible to ignore.
Let's look at the mechanics of defense contracting for a second. The Federal Acquisition Regulation, or FAR, usually requires massive oversight, competitive bidding, and years of prototyping.
But in July 2025, 1789, Capital invests in a startup called Hadrian Automation, which was founded in 2020 with no significant government track record.
And then 8 months later, Hadrian is awarded a $900 million Navy contract to build automated submarine factories, plus an $80 million Army contract.
Nearly $1 billion in taxpayer money directed to a startup immediately after the president's son takes a financial stake.
And this is not an isolated incident. We see the exact same pattern with a company called Vulcan, which specializes in rare earth magnets.
3 months after the president's inner circle gets involved, the Pentagon bypasses standard technical disclosures and competitive bidding, awarding Vulcan a $620 million federal loan.
So a single phone call from the executive branch injects over $500 million of taxpayer capital into a 3-year-old startup. It instantly inflated their valuation from $200 million to nearly $2 billion.
And then you have the completely closed-loop deals involving the other son, Eric Trump. Financial disclosures show both brothers invested in a drone manufacturer called Power US, which immediately secured a lucrative, undisclosed Air Force contract.
Then Don Jr. joins the advisory board of a different drone company, Unusual Machines. Unusual Machines subsequently wins its largest federal contract to date.
And guess what Unusual Machines does with that federal money?
What did they do?
They signed a $5 million supply contract to pay Power US.
Wow, so it is the mechanical funneling of taxpayer funds through corporate cutouts. The federal government pays Company A pays Company B, and the president's family holds equity in both.
To put this in perspective, if a mid-level procurement officer at the Department of Defense held a few $1,000s of stock in a company they awarded a contract to, they would face immediate prosecution under federal conflict of interest laws.
But because these ethics laws were never drafted to encompass the president's adult children, they are operating with total impunity, and they just refuse any calls for recusal.
And this monetization extends aggressively into international finance, specifically the cryptocurrency space. The president, who once publicly decried crypto as a scam against the U.S. dollar, is now heavily involved in it.
Right. The family launched World Liberty Financial and various meme coins, generating an estimated $390 million in revenue just from a token sale.
But the transaction that has national security experts sounding the alarm is the $2 billion stablecoin deal with the United Arab Emirates.
Let's explain how a stablecoin functions in this context. A stablecoin is a cryptocurrency pegged to a fiat currency, usually the US dollar, and it's designed to maintain a stable value.
However, large-scale transactions utilizing stablecoins can be structured to bypass the SWIFT banking system and traditional Know Your Customer or KYC regulations.
Right. And the reporting reveals that MGX, a state-backed investment fund in the UAE, utilized a cutout the stablecoin from World Liberty Financial for a $2 billion transaction.
This structure obscures the direct flow of capital, but the financial reality is that a foreign government is pouring massive wealth into an entity inextricably linked to the president's family, a deal that's expected to yield tens of millions in annual interest.
Which brings us to the Foreign Emoluments Clause of the Constitution. I was reading the history on this. The founders included this specifically because they were terrified of European royalty covertly bribing American diplomats with gifts or titles.
It explicitly prohibits federal officials from accepting any present or emolument from a foreign state.
So by routing $2 billion through a crypto stablecoin, the direct line is blurred, but the outcome is exactly what the founders feared. Because look at the timeline. 2 weeks after this crypto deal closes, the president travels to the UAE.
And immediately following that diplomatic visit, the U.S. government officially approves the sale of hundreds of thousands of highly restricted, advanced NVIDIA AI chips to the UAE.
It is the synchronization of private enrichment and foreign policy. A foreign state injects capital into the family business, and shortly thereafter receives access to highly sensitive, restricted technology.
And this financial leveraging isn't limited to foreign actors either. It is happening within domestic markets. Senator Jon Ossoff detailed this in a recent speech, mapping out the timeline surrounding the Liberation Day tariff announcement we discussed earlier.
The mechanics of this market manipulation are astounding. Let's walk through it. On April 2nd, the president announces the global tariffs. As we established, this panics the bond market and crashes equities.
Right. For a week, tech stocks plummet.
Then on April 8th, while the market is sitting at the bottom of this artificial crater, the president personally purchases millions of dollars in tech equities. NVIDIA, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon.
Now, under the Securities and Exchange Commission's Rule 10b-5, which governs insider trading, executing trades based on material, non-public information is a severe federal crime.
Exactly. Because the very next morning, April 9th, the president posts on Truth Social that it's a great time to buy. And 3 hours and 41 minutes after that post, he unilaterally cancels the tariffs he instituted a week prior.
And the market experiences one of the most massive same-day rebound rallies in modern history. It instantly and artificially inflated the value of the multi-million-dollar portfolio he purchased 24 hours earlier.
I mean, if the CEO of a publicly traded company executed this maneuver, the SEC would freeze their assets by noon.
But the doctrine of presidential immunity shields the executive from this regulatory oversight. Furthermore, the administration has officially introduced paid subscriptions to presidential policy announcements.
Wait, they're literally monetizing advance notice of national security and economic policy.
Yes, allowing high-paying subscribers to position their portfolios before the public is even informed. It's entirely out in the open.
And Eric Trump secured a $1.5 billion luxury residential complex deal in Vietnam at the exact same moment the U.S. government was actively negotiating a 46% tariff with the Vietnamese government.
It's unbelievable. And if corporate executives want to bypass traditional lobbying and speak directly to the people running the government, they can simply join the executive branch private club in Georgetown.
The initiation fee is $500,000, and it guarantees private, off-the-books meetings with top administration officials.
When you aggregate these financial maneuvers, the no-bid Pentagon contracts for family-linked startups, the massive foreign crypto injections correlating with sensitive tech transfers, the explicit manipulation of the stock market via policy reversals, and the pay-to-play access clubs.
What do legal analysts say about all this?
Legal analysts in our sources suggest this absolutely meets the criteria for a RKO investigation.
The Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act.
Right, which requires demonstrating a pattern of racketeering activity executed through an enterprise. In this analysis, the executive branch itself is functioning as the enterprise, utilized to coordinate systemic extortion and self-enrichment.
But if the federal government is the enterprise, who is left to investigate it? When an administration operates as a for-profit syndicate, prioritizing financial loyalty over institutional integrity, the lines between personal business and national security completely dissolve.
And this leads us to the severe vulnerabilities within the intelligence apparatus. Because a government functioning on a system of absolute personal loyalty inevitably discards standard vetting procedures.
Which invites catastrophic national security risks.
Right. When competence and background checks are replaced by fealty, the doors are open to foreign intelligence exploitation.
The most glaring procedural failure highlighted in the reporting centers on Natalie Harp. She is widely known as the human printer because her primary role is following the president with a portable printer, handing him favorable news articles.
But the investigative sources reveal a staggering security breach. She operated at the president's side for a year without a security clearance.
We have to explain the gravity of the SF-86 form. The standard Form 86 for national security positions is a rigorous 130-page background investigation.
It probes the subject's financial history, foreign contacts, drug use, psychological health, basically everything to ensure they cannot be blackmailed.
And Harp repeatedly refused to undergo this process. Yet, by being physically adjacent to the executive, she was inherently exposed to highly classified daily briefings. She was looking at top-secret documents and listening to sensitive geopolitical calls with world leaders on speakerphone.
To have an uncleared, unvetted individual exposed to state secrets for a year is a systemic failure of the intelligence community's most basic protocols.
And it extends to the highest levels of the military chain of command. The reporting details the situation with Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, and his wife.
She holds no official government role. She possesses no security clearance.
Yet, she is deeply embedded in the Pentagon, demanding operational roles and sitting in on classified meetings with foreign military partners.
And the most dangerous OPSEC failure. She was reportedly an active participant in a Signal group chat discussing live bombing targets in Yemen.
Using a commercial messaging app like Signal to discuss active military strikes is already a severe violation of communications security.
Having an unvetted civilian spouse participating in that discussion compromises the entire operational chain of command. Foreign intelligence agencies from the FSB in Russia to the MSS in China, they monitor exactly these types of vulnerabilities.
They don't always look for traditional spies, right?
Exactly. They look for uncleared spouses, individuals with unusual physical access, or officials burdened by massive debts or compromising personal material, because those individuals can be leveraged.
Which forces us to look at the massive vulnerability regarding Jeffrey Epstein. The release of the Epstein files has been a continuous crisis for this administration. The reporting states unequivocally that the executive is petrified of the fallout from these documents.
And the Department of Justice is actively intervening to manage this crisis in federal court.
The sources detail a highly irregular intervention in a lawsuit overseen by federal judge Emmett Sullivan. Todd Blanche, who served as the president's personal defense attorney before being installed in the DOJ, along with DOJ attorney Andrew Block, they are accused of actively deceiving the federal judge regarding evidence.
The mechanics of this cover-up are brazen. The DOJ complied with the subpoena by producing typed, summarized FBI reports regarding the Epstein investigation.
But they actively withheld the raw, handwritten notes taken by the FBI agents during the original interviews?
In the legal world, withholding raw notes that contradict or expand upon typed summaries is a massive violation of the discovery process.
And when the contents of those handwritten notes were finally revealed, they contain allegations from a woman stating she was sexually abused by Donald Trump when she was a 13-year-old girl.
The Department of Justice lied to a federal judge to conceal handwritten FBI evidence of statutory rape against the sitting president.
It is the ultimate weaponization of the justice system for personal protection. When the DOJ functions to cover up alleged crimes of the executive rather than investigate them, the executive is entirely compromised.
And this vulnerability extends directly to foreign influence. Christopher Steele, the former MI6 intelligence officer, provided a stark assessment in the reporting. He stated his professional conclusion that Trump operates as a Russian asset.
Steele points to the financial mechanics of real estate to illustrate this. In 2008, when Trump was facing severe financial ruin and bankruptcy, he sold a property in Palm Beach, Florida.
The property was independently valued at roughly $40 million. He sold it to a Russian oligarch for $90 million.
In the world of anti-money laundering, grossly overpaying for real estate is a classic mechanism for transferring illicit funds and creating leverage. Trump reportedly told his aides regarding the inflated sale, "Putin got me off here, I owe him."
Whether one defines him as a conscious, recruited asset or simply a useful idiot who is easily manipulated through financial leverage and flattery, the intelligence community views the resulting geopolitical reality as identical.
A former CIA official quoted in the sources stated the U.S. is rapidly transitioning into a fascist state. But the most alarming operational detail is the allegation that the FBI has been directed to effectively halt its counterintelligence investigations into Russia as a hostile actor.
If the DOJ is covering up the president's alleged sex crimes, civilians are picking bombing targets on messaging apps, and the FBI is standing down on Russian espionage. The internal security of the state is paralyzed.
And the geopolitical consequences are terrifying. We are entering a highly destabilized nuclear age. The reporting details how the administration's transactional approach to foreign policy, abandoning strategic alliances in favor of personal deals with autocrats in Russia and China, is dismantling the post-World War II global order.
We can see the cascading effects of this destabilization in the Pacific. An extensive report by Australia's Four Corners program highlights that, due to the unpredictability of American defense commitments and China's deployment of new road-mobile hypersonic missiles, Australia now considers itself a highly likely primary target in the event of a regional conflict.
Because the global security architecture relies on the predictability of American alliances.
When that predictability is replaced by the whims of a compromised executive, the entire globe edges closer to conflict.
So, we have an administration engaged in massive systemic self-enrichment, surrounded by unvetted loyalists, allegedly covering up horrific criminal acts and destabilizing global security. The structural question is, how does this administration keep the rest of the government, and specifically its own political party, in line amidst such blatant criminality?
The answer lies in the mechanical application of retribution and fear. The administration enforces discipline through a highly coordinated system of ideological purges and personal distraction.
It is a systematic effort to ensure that loyalty to the executive entirely supersedes loyalty to the Constitution or the rule of law. We saw the mechanics of this loyalty test during the presidential transition.
Right. If you were a candidate for a position in the Pentagon, you were flown to the transition headquarters in West Palm Beach. After standard resume questions, you were placed in a room and asked a literal pass-or-fail ideological purity test.
Who won the 2020 election?
Yes. If you acknowledged the objective reality that Joe Biden won, your candidacy was immediately terminated. It was a formal process of filtering out anyone tethered to objective truth.
And this demand for absolute loyalty has completely consumed the legislative branch. The Republican Party has effectively transitioned from a traditional political entity with a legislative platform into an enforcement syndicate for the executive.
The mechanics of this syndicate were on full display during the confirmation process of Pete Hegseth for Secretary of Defense.
The Hegseth confirmation was really a watershed moment for congressional subjugation. Hegseth was facing severe, credible allegations of sexual misconduct and financial payoffs.
Numerous Republican senators privately believed he was grossly unfit to command the U.S. military.
And Senator Joni Ernst of Iowa, who has publicly shared her own experience as a survivor of sexual assault, voiced standard procedural concerns over his fitness for office.
In a functioning democratic republic, the Senate's role is to rigorously vet nominees. But the response from the executive branch and its allied media ecosystem was a coordinated campaign of personal destruction against her.
They didn't just threaten her with a primary challenger in the next election. They executed a targeted assault on her personal life.
Operatives leaked sensitive, private details from her sealed divorce records onto social media, mobilizing a mob to harass her into compliance.
And the terror tactics worked. Senator Ernst, facing the destruction of her personal life, bowed to the pressure, as did the rest of the party, and confirmed an unqualified, compromised nominee.
When a political apparatus uses blackmail and the weaponization of private records to force a sitting senator to abandon her constitutional duty, they cease to be a political party and operate identically to a mafia syndicate.
And they are applying these exact same tactics to the sprawling federal bureaucracy. Guided by the blueprints of Project 2025, they are utilizing mechanisms like Schedule F to strip civil service protections from tens of thousands of federal employees.
The goal is to dismantle the institutional memory and legal guardrails of the government, replacing career experts with ideological loyalists who will execute unlawful orders without question.
They are completely inverting the justice system. The DOJ is actively opening investigations into political rivals like Joe Biden and Letitia James, utilizing federal law enforcement as a weapon of political retribution.
Meanwhile, they are bringing literal insurrectionists into the halls of power.
Oh, Representative Mike Collins officially hired Dominic Box, right?
Yeah, a man convicted of 2 felony counts for his participation in the January 6th attack on the Capitol, who was pardoned by the president. He was hired to work on his congressional staff.
It is the formal normalization of political violence, and this subversion of the rule of law extends to authoritarian data manipulation. The sources detail a deeply alarming breach involving the Census Bureau.
Under Title 13 of the U.S. Code, census data is strictly walled off from law enforcement and political entities to ensure citizens answer truthfully without fear.
Yet the Department of Justice acknowledged in a federal court filing that it unlawfully breached the Social Security Administration and census databases.
And why did they breach it? To hand that highly confidential data over to private, partisan political groups.
These groups then fed that data into algorithms to cross-reference it with voter rolls, actively attempting to manufacture fraudulent proof that the 2020 election was stolen.
The federal government illegally mined the private data of its own citizens to generate state-sponsored propaganda to justify overturning democratic elections. It demonstrates a total disregard for the legal firewalls designed to protect citizens from the state.
And this hubris, this absolute belief that they are immune to consequences, often manifests in bizarre, petty acts of vandalism against national institutions. Look at the situation with the Kennedy Center.
The Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts is a national monument established by a specific act of Congress as a living memorial to John F. Kennedy.
The Board of Trustees, which the executive branch packed with loyalists, attempted to unilaterally rename the building. Judge Cooper issued a highly detailed, 96-page federal ruling explicitly telling the board that their actions violated the Congressional Act and were illegal.
But the board simply ignored the federal judge. They submitted a resolution attempting to plaster President Donald J. Trump across the building in a massive font.
And in their arrogant haste, they botched the legal filing. They were forced to file an errata sheet, a formal correction document admitting they sent the wrong resolution, and the one they actually voted on demanded his name be displayed in an even larger font.
It is the height of petty narcissism. It's like a bank robber realizing he didn't get enough cash, so he goes back into the vault and leaves more fingerprints on the safe. They are so insulated from accountability that they openly mock federal judges just to stroke the president's ego.
And this total dismantling of safeguards isn't just about monuments. It impacts public health and safety. Look at the deregulation happening at the EPA and the FDA.
The sources highlight a critical example involving the U.S. Forest Service. Following massive wildfires in California, the Forest Service is currently spraying record industrial amounts of glyphosate, the active chemical in Roundup, to clear brush for replanting.
They are doing this despite decades of research, massive class action lawsuits, and billions of dollars in settlements linking glyphosate directly to cancer.
The administration simply ignores the established environmental and health safeguards because adhering to them slows down the process. It is a philosophy that prioritizes speed and corporate utility over human life.
When you look at the totality of this, the weaponization of the DOJ, the illegal data mining, the destruction of senators' lives, the chemical deregulation, you have to ask, how is the public reacting?
The psychological toll on the American populace is staggering. Miles Taylor, a former Homeland Security official, cited a devastating metric in his analysis. 2/3 of Americans now admit to actively self-censoring their political views out of fear of reprisal.
2/3 of the country.
Yes. When the government demonstrates it will use its vast surveillance and legal apparatus to target its enemies, and when allied mobs are mobilized to destroy the lives of those who dissent, the rational human response is to retreat into anonymity.
Right, keep your head down.
Exactly. When the majority of a democratic society is too terrified to speak out, authoritarianism has already achieved its primary objective. The fabric of a free society is defined by open debate. When intimidation replaces discourse, the republic ceases to function.
This has been an incredibly heavy, dense exploration of the current reality. We've mapped out a massive shift in American governance. We looked at an imperial executive branch utilizing the shadow docket and facts on the ground to bypass Congress on everything from White House construction to global tariffs and acts of war.
We analyzed the Nerd Reich, a shadow government of tech billionaires actively utilizing federal power to shield themselves, while shredding historical artifacts to train AI models that threaten global cybersecurity.
We also traced the mechanics of unprecedented corruption, outlining how the president's family utilizes no-bid Pentagon contracts, foreign crypto stablecoins, and market manipulation to extract hundreds of millions of dollars, actions that legal experts argue mirror a RICO enterprise.
We examined the severe national security vulnerabilities created by uncleared personnel, the DOJ's cover-up of statutory rape allegations, and the chilling geopolitical reality of a compromised executive halting counterintelligence against Russia.
And finally, we looked at how this entire system is enforced by a complicit political syndicate that utilizes blackmail, illegal data mining, and the threat of personal destruction to purge the civil service and terrify 2/3 of the American public into silence.
To truly comprehend how this happens so quickly, we have to look at the psychological analysis provided in our sources by Jeffrey Sachs.
What does Sachs say about it?
Sachs identifies the core vulnerability in the American constitutional design. The founding documents, the Federalist Papers, the Constitution itself were built on a baseline assumption that the leaders of the Republic would possess a fundamental sense of shame.
Ah, like a moral floor.
Right. The system assumed that if a leader was caught in a massive scandal or explicitly blocked by a co-equal branch of government, public humiliation and a sense of duty would force them to step back. But Sachs notes that we are dealing with a malignant narcissist who operates entirely without that mechanism.
He has normalized shamelessness as a superpower.
Exactly. When a leader simply refuses to be shamed, the guardrails of a system reliant on behavioral norms completely buckle.
And that leads me to a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over as you process all of this. We spent this deep dive detailing how this specific administration has broken the norms of Congress, the courts, and the economy through sheer brute force, shamelessness, and chaos. But think about the next generation of politicians watching this happen right now. If shamelessness, blatant corruption, and the mobilization of fear are proven to be the most effective tools for achieving absolute unchecked power, and the historical guardrails of the Constitution fail to stop them. What happens when a leader comes along who possesses all of these autocratic instincts, but is actually disciplined enough to use them quietly? What does the American experiment look like then?
That is the ultimate structural integrity question.
Oh.
Once the foundation has been shattered and the precedents have been set, the next storm doesn't have to be nearly as loud to bring the rest of the house down.
The concrete has already been poured. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep asking the hard questions, look past the headlines, understand the mechanics of power, and stay curious. We'll catch you next time.